Hello. Yesterday, the 23rd of August 2012, Ireland dipped its toe back in the international bond markets for the second time in the last 2 months or so. This time round, the NTMA, the National Treasury Agency for Ireland, successfully sold €1 billion worth of Irish government bonded debt, which of course the Irish state has been promoting for the last 24 hours as being extremely positive. In our view, it is still very much a political move more so than an economic move. While it is positive that the international markets bought the Irish bond of €1 billion, the fact of the matter is that it is continuing to be a very expensive way for the Irish government to raise money. To put it into perspective, the €1 billion bond was sold at a yield or at a return to the investor of 5.9% interest. The bailout deal provided to us by the Troika of IMF, ECB and so on is only at 3.7% interest. So one has to ask the question, outside of political manoeuvring, why would the Irish government, or any business entity for that matter, borrow money at 5.9% from one institution when they can secure it from another institution at 3.7%. So clearly there is more than economics at play here, and the answer is most likely that there's politics at play. 5.9% is simply too much money, it's too expensive. To put it into perspective, Irish people today are paying around 4 to 4.25% interest on their mortgage. If you were to take a very simple approach, it would mean that the markets are suggesting that there's a 40 to 50% higher likelihood of the Irish state defaulting on its debt than there is on Irish mortgage holders defaulting on their debt, even though 15% of Irish mortgage holders are now in arrears of 60 days or more, and about 18% are in arrears of one level or other. So while the government might put a political spin on the relative success of selling this €1 billion government bond yesterday, the fact is that at 5.9% it is too expensive. We cannot afford it. It does not make any economic sense when we can borrow money for 2.2% cheaper from the Troika. And it should not be interpreted as an indication of market confidence in an Irish recovery, because the truth is that the rate of interest being charged, it in fact still indicates that we are deemed to be a relatively high risk when it comes to investor categorisation. Indeed, the gap between Irish state borrowing and German state borrowing as the benchmark is in the order of 6%, which would be very close in our view to suggesting that while 7% is the benchmark for it being unsustainable, 5.9% is still exorbitantly expensive on a very small economy like Ireland, and therefore we do not deem it to be particularly positive at all, except to say that to be balanced and fair, it is a step in the right direction, albeit a very, very small one. Ultimately, the Irish economy is a very, very open economy, one of the most open economies in the world. And what that effectively means is that we rely on external customers for a significant export trade. And we also rely on external companies, countries and so on for a lot of our consumable products, because they're imported. And therefore, if an awful lot of our consumer demand is driven by imports, and a lot of our economic strength is influenced by our export, it clearly means that what happens in the world economy is of enormous importance to Ireland. Great Britain is our nearest and most valuable export customer, followed by the EU. Both Great Britain and the EU are under financial strain at the moment. Greece clearly has not gotten ahead of itself and is now looking for yet another extension on its loan repayment terms. Realistically, despite all the huffing and puffing by the powers that be inside in the Eurozone area, they will probably have to do something. to oblige Greece or to bite the bullet and arrange for a structured default whereby Greece will have to leave the euro. It is clear that only one or the other can happen. At the moment, there's a lot of huffing and puffing, but there's no substance behind it. I think that the bottom line, though, for us in relation to Ireland stepping back into the international markets is that while it is a positive move, I think that from an investor perspective, and indeed for us individually running our own businesses and running our own families, we need to remember that though positive, it is very much political driven. Markets are demanding rates of 5.9% and we are willing to pay it. One has to ask the question why. It is too expensive and we cannot afford it. The markets clearly are of the view that we will get a deal on our bank debt. The question is when and how. If there's a debt write-down, some other entity or country or collective of countries will have to cover that write-down, and that will clearly have a negative impact on them. It will also have a negative impact on the reputation of Ireland in one sense, because it still will mean a debt write-down is in effect a structured default. And yet we simply cannot afford to carry the amount of bank debt that we are carrying as a state. The banks need to be held more accountable. In the midst of all this, of course, the banks are not lending money. A survey done by the ESRI, which was released again this week, shows that we are the second weakest economy in the Eurozone area for facilitation of business credit. That figure has been challenged by Pat Farrell from the Irish Bank Association, but his challenge has been very, very strenuously denied by the ESRI and by the people who actually wrote the article saying that Ireland is the second weakest credit facilitation country, second only indeed to Greece. So going back into the bond markets, on principle, is positive. From a practical perspective, at 5.9% it is far too expensive. We simply cannot afford it. The move is much more political than it is economic. There are still several external and internal factors that are going to influence the recovery of the Irish economy in a sustainable manner, and we are still some way off that. While positive, we're still quite a way off coming back in to the international bond markets in a meaningful, sustainable and long-term manner. As this issue evolves and develops, we will have further updates for you. Thank you for listening. Until next time, bye-bye.